Welcome to another episode of War Hero to Superhero, helping military, veterans, and first responders transform their lives from the bedroom to the boardroom. We are in a different studio background. This is week number 3 as you're going over and watching this, our mini series, Before the Bedroom. We have 9 topics to help you thrive before you plunge in to that new bedroom. So this is primarily for people that are not married ever before, or they've gone over and unfortunately went through divorce and they're wanting to go over and get remarried again, which is very much hopeful, and to go over and help you thrive. This week, we're actually focusing and diving into the past. So for some of you, if you're the blended marriage about to become this might be a little more painful. I wanted to give a disclaimer on that. For you, all that are never been married before, hopefully this doesn't dive in too deep, but we all go over and have a past. We all have skeletons. Even me, as I look like Skeletor in a t-shirt. So no matter what your past looks like, good, bad, or ugly, as you're going over and getting prepared for marriage, you need to be going over and sharing that because we all have one. And finding out after marriage is too late. The hurts are too much. It's a lot harder to go over and deal with. And divorce emanates faster, especially when you go find out there's past stuff, especially some of the past stuff that we might bring up. It's primarily focused, as a disclaimer, about people in your past, but it could be all types of things in your past. It could be past bad career moves. It could be past habits. It could be past a lot of things, but primarily we're going to be focusing about past partners primarily because our community in the military, veteran, and first responder world is not immune to this. So you add PCSs and new families and then deployments are already hard enough. If you discover someone has a past while all these things are happening in your life, it can make life unbearable. So knowing the whole story is key to a strong marriage. You want to know the story of before so you know what you're walking into. So now you too can create a new story together and not allow a past story go over and ruin your future story. So before we go jump into the sheets, because that's the goal when you get married, let's get our story straight. And before we get our story straight, we're going to go to a quick sponsor break. Welcome back to War Hero to Superhero Watch on Legarty Media. So if you are looking for positive content that goes over and impacts the global community, Legarty Media is your place. And if you're ready to go over and get started, we would love to have your show on Legarty Media. Jumping back in the content, we are going into another quiz. So each week, as we're in this series, we build a kind of a micro quiz. This quiz is a past story quiz. So this one, again, disclaimer, this is going to get you to go over and think. And if you are watching this with your future significant spouse, you want to make sure that you're asking the questions yourself and not to them. This ain't accusatory time. This is for you in reflection time to go over and do that. So you might want to go over and break out the handy dandy pencil with the handy dandy notebook if you go over and have those two things. If you don't, then do what most people do in relationships. Use your phone to go over and write notes. We scroll so much on it anyway, you might as well write important notes to go over and to remember. So question number 1 on the past story quiz is, do you have other partners before me? That's a question you're going to want to go over and to ask later on. This is not a question right now, but this is questions to go over and reflect on. And you might need to be able to answer this question yourself and go reflect on that back. Next question is, were you intimate with them? And I intimately spelled intimate wrong, but it's okay. You know what it means. Going on from there, how long ago was it? Did it end on good or bad terms? This is probably a major significant one. Any kids? And then you can go over and add your fill in the blank. Because there might be questions that you might have to go over and ask your spouse. And maybe there's questions that you might want to go over and answer as they're going over and asking you these questions. Because sometimes we only ask the questions that we think are most pressing. And sometimes we need to have that fill in the blank question. Because the goal with this before the bedroom and before you jump in the bedroom is not to have the bedroom intimacy ops to go over and affect us. Because sex is great, marriage is great, but when the past is not revealed and now you're adding a new future, and then that past skeleton comes out of the closet, it can go on an impact for a long, long time. Sometimes there's small skeletons, sometimes they're big ones. You're not going to be able to answer everyone. And there's not always just skeletons, like I said, of intimate partners. It could be things that you went through intimately in the past. As you're going over, if you watched the show before, I have skeletons in my closet that are not partners, but I have gone through sexual trauma. My parents have gone through a divorce. I had my brother die. I revealed those things to my spouse, but those triggered things in the bedroom, especially the sexual trauma. So as I went over and it was intimate with her and those skeletons came to arise, it was easier to go over and to deal with compared to, why are you acting all freaky deaky when this part of intimacy happens? Why are you anxious or overwhelmed? Because sex opens up so many things. It is the most emotional, physical, sensual, sexual, biochemistry thing, and the most vulnerability. But the deeper vulnerability is actually going over and with the mind and the heart and the soul. And if you don't go over and work through those things, sex is a byproduct of those things coming out positively or negatively. If you want to learn more, text skeletons to 602-846-5410. We'll go over and send you a quick little article from marriage.com that empowered this next crew of framework of questions that we're going to ask. But before we go over and do that, we are going to go to another quick sponsor break. See you in a few.
Teresa Talks is a new kind of interview show. I'm your host, Teresa Cundiff, and I won't just be interviewing authors who write books. I'll also be interviewing authors who will be writing books. We will have fun and you will be informed and entertained. And you won't want to miss Teresa Time, where I share what's on my heart. Teresa Talks is brought to you by Wordy Nerds Media and distributed by Legrity Media. Teresa Talks can be found on all these platforms, on these smart TVs, and wherever there is internet around the world. I'm excited for you to join me on Teresa Talks.
Welcome back. Whoa, I'm echoing. Give me a second right there. There we go. Sorry about that. Welcome back to War Hero to Superhero. Before we went on the break, we were talking about our past story quiz. And now we're going to get into the framework of questions that gives you ways and things to think about to move forward. Because some people's skeletons for certain people might be harder than others. I know for me, I wasn't intimate with anybody. But my skeleton of sexual trauma, divorce, and brother's death impacted everything I did. And also skeletons of verbal abuse that I went through on a regular basis. Those things painted the picture of what came out of my closet as I went over and connected with my spouse. And maybe for you, it didn't impact anything, but it might impact the other person, even knowing those things. So we wanted to give you a framework for you and your spouse. And again, these are things for you to go over and to implement, but making sure that both of you are on the same page. Because when you're both in the same story, you're going to want to go flip that page to write that next chapter in the life. So first recommendation we go over and give you is to go over, and framework of questions to go over is to talk it out. It's always recommended just to make that time an intimate time. You don't want to make it on a fun date. You want to have an intention to go over and to talk this out. Maybe you do it through premarital counseling or consulting and whatnot. Maybe you do it through a Bible study. Maybe you do it through a chaplain, maybe someone else, but you need to go over and talk it out. So maybe some of those questions you take as a list and go over and have that. Maybe it's only once a month, depending on there. But if you are planning to go over and to get married, we recommend you to treat it like surgery and go a little faster. If you have that opportunity to go over and you're doing a more of a courtship, 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, 2 years and whatnot, talking it out might be broken out, like let's say on a monthly introspective date night or whatnot, just to get a little deeper and get that connection. And after you go talk it out, tell your concerns. There might be concerns why you're worried about those skeletons in the closet, telling concerns that maybe your skeletons and their skeletons go over and mesh one another. Maybe they go over and hit one another. Maybe you went over and came from relationship after relationship and you're concerned about them going over and leaving because they had so many relationships. Maybe there was abuse in their past and they were abused as a kid, and then you're concerned about they came from an abusive environment and they're wondering, how are you going to go over and be different? Because maybe if you've gone through abuse and the other person has been abused, they might have those concerns that how are you going to go deal with it? There's many different layers you can go in there, but talking about your concerns. I feel and I think statements are totally key, as we talked about last week in that particular regard too. You don't want to go over and dismiss their feelings. So when they're talking about their concerns, and ladies specifically, as you're having these conversations more than men, you need to tell the men specifically, I want you to just listen and not solve, because we're naturally problem solvers. So you need to give us a heads up. You want us to be in fixer mode or you want us to be in listening mode, fixing mode or listening mode. From there, each of you need to go over and to learn this one, and this one's always the hardest, is visiting their perspective. As we talked about earlier in the personality styles from Inspiring Lizzie and Cautious Carla, well, Cautious Carl, just to be correct in that regard, that you can't always be living in the other person's style, but you can go over and visit the perspective for a short bit. So you're learning to go visit them, being empathetic, visualizing what they went through and seeing maybe why they made the decisions that they did. You don't have to go over and agree. It's just visiting and being empathetic. A framework question specifically that you might want to be asking yourself as the skeletons that are coming out of the closet, and it's a 3-part question. Does it bother you? Of the skeletons that they went over and revealed, are you locked down because of those skeletons? And why? Is it a preference thing or is it a deep-seated value thing? Like if you are maybe both Christians and you expected both of you not to have any sex outside of marriage and one partner did, does it bother you? And are you locked down and why? And trying to figure out, is your values in faith, religion, philosophical views, whatever it is, are those things higher than what the person is, or who the person is that you want to be with? Those have to be going over and determined before you go over and get married, because it will haunt you if you don't. Because again, if they have kids and they have been intimate, or they go over and from their past relationships, they believe that trying it out before they buy it might be a deal breaker for you as you're going over and dating for marriage before the bedroom. So things to go over and to think about. For myself, I had a really strong conviction about being with somebody that was a virgin, but that didn't happen. But the thing is that she was more valuable than her virginity. It was one of those values that I had, and it was more of a preference than anything else. But I know that we are both intimate with each other, and we both believe that we should both be intimate with each other till death do us part. We don't believe in other values of, dating outside of marriage, trying those type of things and whatnot. So those values were huge for us. But the value of, did you have sex before you met me? Yeah. I had to change that value to going over and like, especially as you get older, and especially if you're going into a blended marriage, that's going to be very difficult to go over and find. You're walking into a second marriage, and most likely that person's going to be a second marriage too. That's a value that you could have had in your first marriage, but definitely can't have that in your second marriage. So it's things to go over and to think about. And as you go over and everything to go over and to work through those skeletons, again, as we talked about, to visit them. You don't need to live there. So visiting them is, again, about being empathetic. That's going to help to go over and to work through those skeletons, clean out that closet and everything else. If you stay in there as a stuck point, you will be inhibiting what beautiful intimacy that you can have together. So visit them for where you need to be, but land the plane. My introspective people, my critical thinkers, the ones that go over and tend to go over and do analysis paralysis, set a timer, set so many days, set whatever it is, work through it, wrestle through it. But when you're done, you're done. If you have faith and you make that type of decision that particular way, you need to ask the Lord to go over and to help you visit that person where they're at, but not live in that brokenness, because you'll cause your own additional skeleton closet for going over and revealing what skeletons were in your closet. And as these skeletons are coming out of the closet, what is more important, them or the junk? One's not right. One's not wrong. They're both just different. You have to determine what values are higher in that particular regard. If we automatically choose them and one of their, let's say, past junk issues was they were abusive in the last relationship, like they were the abuser, then that junk is actually more important to deal with than just being with them, because they could have a proclivity to be abusive. I'm not saying to jump into a relationship if they were going to work through it. But the thing is, I give that extreme example because some issues will be your value in what junk that they went over and brought in the skeleton's out closet. And other ones are going to be, it's a lot, you made it a lot bigger than what it is, and they are more important. Additionally, to go over and work through that is sometimes we get caught in other people's closets, skeleton closets. We go in and we're like, oh, damn, that is dirty. Look how many things they're going to have. Like people, relationships past, brokenness, alcoholism, abuse, whatever it is, or bad relationships or whatever, all those types of things. But you have a past too. And to them, you could be the same filthy or worse in that particular regard. So being humble and realizing you're both opening up the closet doors, you're both going over and sharing of the past. And remember that you have a past too. You don't want to be prideful about your closet, but you don't want to live in despair. You don't want to go over and live in despair in their closet, and you don't want to be jealous and prideful of their skeleton closet, because it's a skeleton closet for them and them alone, but they're sharing it with you so you can have this intimacy together after the bedroom and in the new place, so you can thrive for a lifetime. Another question to go over and ask yourself in this toolkit, in this framework of going over and dealing with skeletons in the closet is the past in the present? For example, we'll go back to intimate partners. is that intimate partner still in your life? Are they working at your employment? Are they coworkers? Is it boss and coworker? Are they business partners? Are you still going over and having a relationship because you have kids? Can you go over and bear if their past is still in their present? And it could be worse in that regard. If they have a past of alcoholism, but they haven't got rid of the alcohol out of the household, or they have a sex addiction and they're still actively on Pornhub or whatever that is their past in their present? Something to consider if what skeletons you're going to go over and exhort. A thing to go and remind you about, though, in that particular regard, is that it is a marathon. You can initially open the closet and go over and show all your skeletons and everything else and leave that closet open. But the thing is, like a walk-in closet, sometimes you're not going to see everything. Things could go over and trigger throughout the years. I know for my sexual trauma that I have occasions that my skeletons will come back out in that particular regard. My skeletons sometimes come out with my kids because of things that I went through in the past. So it's a marathon. So we have to have an understanding that this closet just doesn't get cleaned from head to toe right when it goes over and opens. And then life goes over and happens. And sometimes we could be throwing bones in their closet and they could be throwing bones in our closet, and life in general can throw some other things as things go over and happen. I know one couple that has been married for 20 plus years, and she went on a business trip and she got drugged and she went over and got date raped in a sense. She wasn't even on a date. She was at a bar. She had a drink. Somebody dropped in and then she got sexually assaulted. So it was a skeleton that now has come into her closet, and it was never meant to happen. And it got more stuff, and him and her are still beautifully together, but it was a hard skeleton to go over and to open up, especially when it wasn't even her fault. It's still a hard thing to go do. So sometimes skeletons come in life, sometimes as ones that you weren't aware of. I know for me, my sexual trauma didn't actually come up until my 30s. This was like 5 to 7 years into marriage. So it's a marathon when we go over and open those closets. Even if we're fully vulnerable, sometimes it's things that we might not remember or things that we blocked out. So as you're going over and building this framework on what skeletons you can go over and deal with, remember, it's a marathon sometimes to go over and to continually clean out those closets. And last and certainly not least, we want to go encourage to go over and to add prayer, meditate, and to seek premarital counseling or consulting before you go over and jump into the sheets. Because the thing of it is that when you have an outside perspective come in, it is huge. One of my skeletons wasn't any intimate partners. There's another one to go reveal. One of mine was about ministry. I really wanted to go over, and I had a set mission on what I wanted to go over and do in 2006. And my premarital counselor, Christian guy, really cool. His name is Ron Han. He went over and he says, what if your wife becomes your ministry? That was a skeleton in my closet that I made ministry my idol in a sense. And he challenged me during that time. And it was such an I.O. day that I initially said, I don't know, I think I would pray about it. And then I would learn to go over and deal. And my wife was literally, his fiance at the time, was literally becoming my ministry, challenging me in that moment, that particular time, because she was turning pasty white, puking out black bile, found out that she had a cyst on her ovary. And then I had to floor it to the hospital. And now I was taking care of her for several days. That was unplanned at all before we even got married. And that was a prerequisite that I had a skeleton in the closet. That ministry was my idol in that particular regard. So that helped me immensely working through that premarital counseling in that particular regard to go over and realize that some skeletons are not always people. Some skeletons can be multiple different things. So prayer, meditate, seek premarital counseling or consulting. Our superhero challenge for you this week is to text skeletons to 602-846-5410 if you are wanting to seek a 20-minute closet checkup. We go over and we'll discuss some of those questions to go see if you want to work with us, to go over and say what skeletons are in your relationship. It's for you and your partner, and it's totally free for the first 50 people that go over and text this in the next 14 days. So we'll give this service free up to 50 people for the next 14 days as you watch this show, that you can go over and get a closet checkup. We normally charge $100 an hour, so you're just getting this for free. So if you are wanting to have an outside perspective to go over and help you to get a closet checkup, text skeletons to 602-846-5410. So that locks in another week of War Hero to Superhero, helping you to get prepared before the bedroom. We will see you on the next episode. Have a good evening.